Okay, so I have a presentation about NFT. Is the NFT something beneficial for art nowadays? According to Binance.com, an NFT, non-fungible token, is a type of cryptographic token on a blockchain that represents a unique asset. This can either be entirely digital assets or tokenized version of real-world assets. NFT is a built structure. This structure is built of blockchain system. The most common use, we have an Ethereum structure. Less frequent use, Solana, Polygon, Polkadot, and a lot of more existing in a metaverse universe. NFT and blockchain have a few features which are really important for that type of digital assets and digital art. NFT is authorized by safe blockchain system. It have a unique authentication of the creator. It's really similar how we can see in a museums or in an auctioning system of real world, real art, actually, real touchable art. We have an ownership history, appraisal value of a particular piece of art, and also transparency of data ownership and accessibility. So it's really transparent for each user who would like to see NFT art or buy to make a purchase of it. What it comes from, where it comes from actually. NFT grows from the digital art actually. For an example, I put a Museum of Modern Art film department exhibition from '83. At 80s, after about 10 years of existing of digital art, they made an exhibition, and it's really important here, I mentioned it, the development of this new art form, they describe it. They split it for 3 parts, this exhibition. First one was to narrative and performance video. Second one was about television and artist reactions for broadcasting and commercial advertisement. And third one were about image processing and computer-generated artworks. And this is the most important one for this presentation and for NFT creations. Because here we have a first NFT. It was made by Jennifer and Kevin McCoy in 2014. They built it on Ethereum structure, and the first one which have been used for NFT art. This is a moving picture actually. Here I have only photo of it, but it's a digital product, digital art, which were the first one minted on Ethereum. NFT is divided for a few categories actually. Mostly we're seeing NFT avatar pictures or gaming items, but we also have separated art movement, music movement, and memberships. What I'm saying about art and split it for this section of NFT. Because NFT is really low segment of general NFT. Here I have statistics about active wallets distributions. As we can see, gaming segment is the biggest one and the biggest case of NFT creations. And the art segment is only 6% of purchases, and only 6% of people having digital wallets having this art segment items. NFT is not so far from classical art also. And this is an NFT made by Botto. It's the digital art painting. Why I'm showing it? As we can see, it's really involved in classical art, like Kandinsky or Bokeh on the right side. The movement of a brush, the colors, the thought is inspired by the older art. Artists using only different tools for it, the digital tools, which create something a little bit different. Here I have also Serpentine from 2023 for an example. This is repercussions of Baroque art, classical Baroque still nature or classical portrait. The feature set and the coloristic tempo, it's really growing from the classical art. The third example I would like to show, it's Yazid one. It's also connected with Bauhaus and theories about the dot, the line, and the shapes which can create something new, something similar also to the classic thoughts of artists. NFT also developed a few different artistic strategies and giving new opportunities. Here is the 3 artworks of Dmitry Cherniak, who is not making art by a normal structure, digital pen or digital brush, but he's using computer programming to creating his artworks. His thought is to create something from dots and lines, which computer making in a certain shapes. He exactly don't know what will gonna be here, but he's programming it for some structures. He's giving the purpose for the artwork and the purpose of the creation, color, and the type of structure. Also, I would like to mention Refik Anadol artworks. This is also animated video. I put three parts of it. He's interested in generating old art also. And at 2022, he made a project with MoMA. He created a base of whole collection of MoMA. This picture on the middle shows his artwork. It was moving and still generated artwork, which includes whole collection of MoMA. On the right side, we have the structures he have been working for, and on the left side also. If we're going to institutions, like I said about MoMA, here we have a Manchester project, the Whitwork Art Gallery and the Vastory Group from Manchester. They made a project about NFT and how institutions can deal with NFT actually in a real world, how we can use it for some nice things to the future. And they minted NFT from their William Blake's The Ancient of Days graphic. They pointed out that this artwork was reproduced endlessly since its original print from mass circulation in the 19th century. And right now they are making it further. They're putting the artwork to the NFT to spread and to make community wider and to share it with people. And this is this artwork you probably know. And this is the statements of this project. They wanted to redirect the capital flows into the social capital, and they wanted to share the flows from the NFT sales for the people. They wanted to educate in art, educate in gallery. They wanted to bring the money back to the people, but in other way. They have been searching also methods of extending museum community in Manchester. They have been authorized digital copies of the artworks, so they made it in all legal way to make some flows and some prompts from it. They have been making questions about art substance and looking for an unconventional model of display. And for a last thing, I would like to quote Alistair Hudson, the head of this Manchester project. A lot of rules we set ourselves as institutions are about holding control, authorship, provenance, power. The NFT project is very much about letting go. And with these words, I would leave you. And thank you very much.
Thanks very much. I thought it was very interesting. I sort of come from, or my question is coming from a more traditional angle, which is, do you think that NFTs one day will basically replace the more conventional way of authenticating an artwork? Is it a more secure way than a hard copy certification, for instance, that you would get with an edition of prints, an edition of videos, or even with an original oil painting, for instance? Thanks.
If it goes about classic art like painting or sculpting, surely not. But if it goes about digital art and digital creations, it can formalize the structures of it, the videos holding like museum holding your videos. It's safer, it's in certain place, they can sell it and purchase it as they want actually. And
can I interrupt just because I know I won't be able to ask another question, just to say, are we seeing that evolving now? Are museums taking advantage of that with, for instance, the certification of an archival video copy? Are they using NFTs to lock that into place, that authenticity? Thanks, thank you.
Okay, so maybe it will be in some structure, but for sure I'm concerned about that. So like it will be still existing in normal physical way because it's still some heritage. So if it goes about old video arts, old photography, it will still exist like this as long as we can save it in this form. But in other form, like new art generated right now, perhaps it will be used like NFT.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you, very nice presentation. And I wanted to ask you from a perspective of an artist. I was trying all this NFT process to pursue. I was making a wallet. I was trying to cope with the money-wise problems with Ethereum and how to do all the digital process. And I think I got to the conclusion that it's just a pyramidal business exactly that everyone is facing it nowadays with even the digital money that we are facing, which for me are a little bit of a delusional how to say, process, because I'm of a generation that can probably understand perfectly how it's going on, and I don't believe in none of this, and I don't want to be stubborn in a way or another, but researching it more and more without any details to be given now, I feel that it's exactly like the last slide that you provided, that it's a little bit, I think that we are too complicated we are complicating too much in details rather than seeing exactly the process of just buying and selling, which can be very simple in a way or another. Of course, the digital world can be very wide. You presented also some artists that probably already sold some NFTs, and you described them, but there are like also several, like hundreds, thousands of artists that cannot afford to, like me, as I was, and trying to deal with the process of dealing with Ethereum. So I feel, and I wanted to ask you in the last piece, that if you are also an artist and if you were trying to do this, or why you did this presentation, because maybe in a way or another, I think you also have a negative conclusion out of it.
Okay, so I think generally, I had also like statistics I didn't show. NFT is really low if it goes about interest right now, and it have a peak. It is going up and down, and right now it exists about 10 years maybe, and it's still developing. Right now we have only a few signs and a few steps with it about NFT, but these projects about next 10 years can extend. We can use it in different way. We can find other solutions for it, because I know right now NFT is really low and it's going down. Actually, nobody is interested, and the price is going down also. But maybe this is the bridge we can build actually, and invite something new later. That's the only beginning, I think.
Okay, so your conclusion is actually positive.
Yeah.
In a way.
Wait on to that.
Yeah, I was expecting something else, because as maybe what I had in mind, I tried to make it a reality in a way or another to see what is going on. But reading several new articles of what is going on in the blockchain world, and especially Bitcoin, that it's controlling all the money, all the digital money. You go with the big ones, with especially the whales, if they're deciding if you can invest or not. So I feel NFT, it's even lower of this. It's like also controlled by the digital money. So for me, it's a very pyramidal way of thinking. So somehow also I don't trust in artists invest in NFTs, because as an artist you are already struggling with selling your art, so you don't need to invest more money for selling your art already. You just have to still doing in an old school way. Mm-hmm. So yeah, we will see what is going on in the future, but I don't believe that much in this concept.
Can I actually respond to that?
Yes.
Whenever you go into media this, you have to have a business case starting. So do you have a business case going into it? Did you know your audience? Did you know you can sell the work before you started? or were you more excited?
Can you ask again?
So I would like to comment on this, because I do work in NFTs. Actually, one of my sponsors is a crypto hardware wallet, and I can respond to your questions as well from an artist perspective, if that's okay. The museums are not adapting very well. I have some museums that have adapted and they're excited, but don't quite get it. But with the Smithsonian project I showed, I offered it as an NFT, and we had like a security guide actually from the government offering to help, and they couldn't get through the formal processes. So this is a big difficulty we're running into. All my collectors, I do offer an NFT as provenance for physical work. They love it. They think it's great. They take it. But not as the NFT artwork itself. The NFT art collectors that I have is very important, like as in the old school world as well. You sell before you hang. So you want to have the show sold out before you hang it in the gallery, before you bring it to market. So anything that you invest, you know you're going to make back. So with my collectors of strictly digital NFTs, they know they're getting value because whatever happens to the NFT market, they bought Amy Carl's NFT when she first did an NFT, like my first drop or subsequent drops.
So you have to, yeah.
So they have the value,
You have
yeah.
to be already part of something to
Yeah.
get the process to look
Yes.
a bit more. But I was referring myself for the beginning of the artwork.
Mm-hmm.
Like if you are not already in the process of selling, to add it on the market, it's very hard for the beginners.
Yes.
That it's extremely hard, and in a world that everyone is an artist in a way or another, because there are several thousand more of people that are doing
I
this.
beg your pardon, but I must remember about my role. We are very close to the limits of our freedom, and I must remind about the order. I beg your pardon.
Imagine that you find yourself in a pitch darkness. Whichever direction you turn your eyes to, there is pure blackness, the void. You do hold the consciousness of your physical body, of your you do hold your the consciousness of your presence in this very place, the feeling of your physical body, despite any physical traces of it. That would prove it. It is an intimidating feeling, the one which could have accompanied the venture into the depths of the Paleolithic caves. Now imagine that you raise your hand, trying to touch the surface in front of you, and hope that your hand will eventually meet the resistance of the matter, that your hand will touch the surface. But even no such resistance occurs, your gesture leaves a simple dot. But this very moment makes you discover the trace, the visible mark, the gesture by which you inscribed yourself into the world. You repeat, marking the space around you. Dots, lines, and curves evolve into more complex signs. Signs become more and more ordered, and eventually you arrange them one by one. With discovering linearity, you discover the linear time of history, and your thinking become historic and linear as well. You connect signs with the sounds your voice makes. And eventually, you inscribe the first word. Words written one by one create lines of text. Lines written one by one create a texture, the textual patch, the surface you were longing for. But the expected physicality of writing falls apart. The moment you try to approach it or touch it, you are struck by its immateriality. You may easily walk through the written touch. You may zoom in to such an extent that the effect creates thumb perspective, shrinking you in a giant environment where all the strokes return gaze. It is possible to zoom out and minimize your writing so that it becomes a tiny seed in your hands, or a sphere that you may willfully rotate. You can freely change the viewer's perspective, discovering illegibility embedded in every legible composition of your writing, as its strokes disconnect, distort, and diminish. You may multiply the written universe you have created just by one gesture, and with the very same gesture wipe it out, returning to the point of departure, leaving no trace of any presence. This very description does not cover any of my dreams, nor it is any fantasy, the product of fantasy. Actually, this is the account of the real experience of longhand writing. new media writing, writing in virtual reality. And although it is real in a way that it is factual, everything that I have described has actually happened, it still shows its distinctive features with the way our imagination works. So real, unimagined, imagined, but real, how to deal with this conclusion. The dominant new media art discourse defines virtual reality, images with immersion, so the simulation of perception of the real world. In other words, the simulation where the viewer confuses the depicted image with the real object, the situation where the viewer believes that the thing displayed in the image is actually present. But as Professor Lambert-Wiesing pointed out in one of his essays, immersion ceased to be the essential feature of virtual reality images, for the semantic field of the notion of virtuality has been extended to non-immersive images as well, like computer games or screen projections of the VR, just to name a few. Hence, virtuality and immersion does not overlap perfectly anymore. They cannot be interchangeably without any consequences. Professor Wiesing indicates the assimilation of the image to the imagination as the newness that new digital media bring into the ontology of image. So the structural resemblance of the image to the imagination. And this assimilation refers mainly to the movement of the image object in the image. While working on my PhD dissertation on performative writing in VR, I have returned multiple times to the essay Virtual Reality, the Assimilation of the Image to the Imagination by Professor Lambert-Wiesing, which perfectly shows this relationship. Let me quote, "The displayed can be freely modified as displayed. The imaginary object, the displayed can be freely modified as displayed in a way in which fantasy contents can be modified. The imaginary object visible in the image by means of the new media has been structurally assimilated to the imaginary but invisible object of fantasy. An image object becomes an externalized fantasy object. Externalized fantasy object," end of quote. Digital media became the extension of our imagination. We use them to imagine something, to have, and again, Professor Wiesing's expression, imaginations produced for us. Jérôme Monnier, the VR industrial pioneer, the VR art pioneer, and the person conceived to coin the term virtual reality, define it as means of making the imagination external. So, of course, the relationship between the virtuality, the virtual images, and the imagination itself is more complex, but for the sake of this presentation, it is sufficient to notice this very assimilation. Just as the work of the imagination, the dreaming, challenges our rationality of physics, describing the world we live in, virtual reality also introduces distortions of the perception, which I would subsequently refer to as cognitive biases. And in case of performative writing in VR, those biases concern perception of time, space, body-mind relationship, awareness of the audience participation, and materiality of artwork. So let's start with the temporality. Wilhelm Flusser described writing as, quote, "an action by which material is put on surface to form a specific pattern," end of quote. A pattern made by letters, by alphanumeric code. The written pattern emerges with the gesture of placing letters and other marks one after another, in a linear fashion, as a sequence of steps, as a movement performed from the start to the very beginning, from the start to the very end, the finish. Hence, writing is a linear medium, and this very fact became the core concept and the starting point in Flusser's argumentation for developing the idea that writing became the cultural program of the Occident, a kind of a DNA of our culture, the Western culture, reshaping human consciousness from magical, mythical into temporal, directional, and therefore historical. Let me recall the passage from Flusser's book, Does Writing Have a Future? Only one who writes lines can think logically, calculate, criticize, pursue knowledge, philosophize, and conduct himself appropriately. Before that, one turned in circles, like we are lost in circles. And the longer one writes lines, the more historically one can think and act. The gesture of writing produces historical consciousness, which becomes stronger and penetrates more deeply with more writing. End of quote. However, entering the virtual reality to perform writing distorts the way how the modern human mind perceives the temporality. Obviously, it is not cyclical, as assigned by Flusser, to preliterate consciousness for each stepping into the VR is by necessity impossible to continue endlessly. There is no room for repetition, no for any dynamics of the cyclical occurrence of things. It is a simulation which one needs to eventually leave, log out, disconnect. But VR challenges also the feeling of the linearity of time and the flow of time, the feeling of its flow. Time in VR seems as if it hasn't been invented. Writing in VR without any pre-imposed time frame, without any schedule telling you how much time you want to spend in there, passes definitely quicker than in reality. So it results in the subjective feeling that you have spent more time there, that you have less time that you have planned. So once you take your VR goggles off, it strikes you as though that the objective measure of time spent in VR is always longer than the subjective impression of being there. And with my partner in writing performances, amazing calligrapher Brody Neuschwander, we were always truly surprised how long our VR rehearsals actually took. So although the stopwatch showed 40 minutes, for us the time spent in VR had almost no length at all. It was like the blink of an eye. All that has happened in there seemed to implode, so transforming the linear endurance, the line of time, into the single point. Someone could argue that the experience of linearity of time cannot change in VR, taking into consideration the very fact of the linear character of writing itself. But because of the dynamic and constantly changing perspective, the linearity of writing is being continuously undermined. And that concerns even the linearity of composing the separate letter shapes with strokes, because once you change the viewer's perspective, by rotating VR universe, just as it was placed on a potter's wheel, but rotating in 360 degrees, so in each possible direction, something unexpected pops up. In traditional calligraphy, where writing support is flat, strokes, constructing letter shapes, overlap and merge eventually to create the single shape. And it is not possible in VR. So the change of the perspective in VR reveals the discontinuity of strokes. For it is just impossible to start writing in exactly the same place where writing the previous stroke ended. There is always a gap, even the size of a pixel. The gaps between strokes introduce the discrete structure of writing. So turning any inscription into an abstract composition. It is just as legibility had become a function of perspective, not a writing itself. In this very sense, illegibility is embedded in every legible writing composition in VR. And hence, the act of writing constantly loses its linearity. This very fact influences the perception of time, the direction of thinking, the desire to link the separate experiences, moments, into the logical order. I'm not claiming that virtuality cancels the historical thinking described by Flusser. My VR calligraphy performances were always based on a script, and I used VR writing gesture to tell a story. But writing in VR challenges and very easily suspends our cognitive habits, so that telling the story by writing in VR assumes a kind of a parallel to the act of performing writing activity on meta level. So being immersed in non-linear structure of virtuality and reminding yourself that it is a simulation, that there is an invisible thread running through all of the moments, a linearity of thought you should go back to. It is just easy to get lost. It is just as easy to lose all the connection with the things that cannot enter the virtuality. In terms of the physical body of the performer, the feeling of separation with the mind is actually with the body is actually a matter of time and intensity of the visual stimuli of the VR. In case of me and Brody Oichfander, it appeared that our rehearsals cannot last longer than 40 minutes. For after exceeding this time, the connection with our bodies were automatically restored in quite a painful way. Our bodies were sending us signals to leave the simulation. I'm talking here about like watering of the eyes, headaches, dizziness, sometimes loss of balance. After that time, virtual space took on a hostile form, as if trying to push us out of itself, or reminding that we do belong to the physical dimension. But restoring the body-mind relationship in virtuality might be used as an artistic expression as well. It is possible to write with dynamic brushes, whose trace, instead of being static and motionless, is constantly moving, animating. Such a trace does not have one single form, but exists as their constant transformations. So unlike traditional calligraphic strokes, which freeze in motion, and in this sense are described in the spatial dimension, the kinetic brush trace becomes a spatio-temporal object, the sum of its various states of existence. The effect is overwhelming and too intense as for the visual stimuli, natural for our perception. It is impossible to introduce into virtuality sounds accompanying writing gesture. The virtual space of writing gesture is silent, unlike the traditional calligraphy, bustling with the sound materiality. So on the one hand, it is the sound materiality over the writing instruments encountering resistance of the paper. I'm talking here about the sound of scraping, scratching, tapping, the preparation of calligraphic tools like opening ink bottles, the sound of quills sharpening, cling of metal nibs. Other sounds describing the meeting of the calligrapher's hand with the rough surface of the paper, or new movements of his body. On the other hand, it concerns the calligrapher's corporeality and the work of his body during the act of writing, such as like breathing, murmurs, and the sounds of changing the position of the body. So moving the chair, reaching for another sheet of paper, all of these actions produce some sounds accompanying writing. This is why it struck us as something natural to introduce live music to our performances. And here again, the cognitive distortion appeared. Although the musicians were present on the scene with us, feeling our actions with the music, just after a couple of minutes, our auditory impressions were being completely dulled. The sound intensified the feeling of immersion to such an extent that we literally were not hearing the music. Interesting story is that during one of the performances, we have agreed with the musician that the musician would give us the sound signal to trace the time, and the sound eventually remained completely unnoticed by us. And despite multiple rehearsals, like focusing our attention, okay, there would be a sound signal, like I'm waiting for it, despite of many attempts and even making the sound signal unpleasant for the ears, very unpleasant experience for our hearing sense, or making the sound low enough to feel it in our bodies, like a trembling instead of like hearing it, we were not able to get it. So the conclusion, the definition of of writing, coined by Flusser, I have already recalled, is not complete. Having concluded that, let me quote again, to write means to perform an action by which material is put on the surface to form a specific pattern, end of quote, Flusser warns us against its shallow interpretation. Writing is not a constructive gesture, not a simple bringing together two objects, what you write with and what you write on, to form a new structure, the textual structure, the written structure. And to understand it in a way Flusser wants us to do so, we need to go back to the original form of writing. And it was a highly dynamic action, an act of engraving, scratching, literally making holes. And as such, the act of distracting, perforating, and penetrating. A penetrating gesture which informs affective structure. The gesture of writing in the virtuality becomes not only a literal act of penetrating the space, but above all, the gesture penetrating our cognitive structure with all its complexity, contradictions, and inaccuracies. Thank you so much.
Thank you. So we have a very short time for questions. So please stay for a moment. But
I also have a question. May I give myself a voice?
Yes.
Thank you. Because you are saying a lot about the action of writing, and for me, writing is always about the meaning which is behind words. Right? You're creating words just to show an idea, to say a thought, and to materialize a thought, something abstract. So I just wanted to say, because I haven't heard, maybe you did mention what you are writing.
What I'm writing?
Or
what I'm writing. Okay, what it is all about. So let me just start with maybe the meaning of the word calligraphy itself. I mean, in the Western tradition, there is an absolutely different meaning of what the writing is, and how that very functional act of writing corresponds with aesthetical dimension of it. So let me just recall that when the term calligraphy was coined in the Western tradition, it was the very beginning of 16th century. It appeared as a term for beautiful texts, so admiring the literary value behind the text for students learning how to write. So these were like the beautiful quotes that should have been written by the students or scribes. So beautiful writing in a way that there is a beautiful text worth written down. And then there was the shift into the aesthetical dimension when calligraphy became the word referring to only the Greek script. So the writing manuals around the end of the turn of 16th and 17th century. I'm talking here about like the French writing book by Le Garnier, referred to understand. So Tali used the word calligraphy to refer to how to learn to write in Greek script, and it was just with like Kantian aesthetics, right? The 8th century. Evolution of aesthetics as a science, and probably the mutual agreement, that we should also value the way how the writing looks like, not only what it stands for, that it is not a transparent vehicle of meaning, but also the artistic means as itself, came with 18th century writing books, where calligraphy became actually referring to the way how to write beautifully in Latin script. But interesting point is that when the Diderot created his encyclopedia for l'écriture, for writing, in preparing this chapter on writing, there was not a single time used, the word beauty of calligraphy was not used any single time. And when we consider encyclopedia as a amazing means or vehicle to introduce like a new word into the use, the broad use, but it did not happen actually, so that is interesting. So yes, you're right that generally when we write, and it is what Flusser says also, before writing there's always a thought to be written, but with the changes in art after the Second World War and with the postmodern turn in Western culture, just as what has happened with figurative art, the meaning, the verbal meaning of the message has been separated from the way how the written gesture was evaluated.
But I think that from what you have already said, I totally understand that you are more interested in the process or of making your thoughts visible than about the meaning of this thought. Yes.
Mm-hmm. Well, in my performances, I'm using VR tool to enhance the performative aspect of writing, which was lost in Western art, but which was present in a Greek writing tradition, because Greeks were written in scripta continua, so with no words separated. When the text was always read aloud. It was not. I mean, silent reading is quite a recent discovery.
Yeah,
so it was working with it was corporeal in a way. Writing was corporeal. So this is what I'm also trying to explore.
Yeah, thank you. It's clear for me.
Okay.
I was just going to say, I found the whole thing very interesting. We're out of time. I'm going to talk to you over lunch about it. Thanks.
Thank you so much.
Just a very short thing. It's quite interesting, this linearity and continuity of writing. But you take all the joy of being in the realm of the 3D world of VR and leaving all the audiences out. So do you think of in the future, I mean, it's like to include them also in this virtual world?
Very good question. Yes. So now you are truly you want all the competition for the best questions already. Well,
please give a short answer.
Short answer. So now technology allows 12 people to attend in the room where the performance is happening. The rest during the coffee break. Probably.
Okay.
I do not think that it is fine, but it's all about technology.
Okay.
So. Thanks very much. When we look at a photograph, what do we think? How does it make us feel? Photographic images are freighted with an association with reality. Received ideas about them are tied up with reportage, with the recording of moments, and in some cases, as Boyd and Gorman Murray note, with archives and posterity. Being a physical consequence of light reflected from the subject onto a photoelectric chip, or traditionally, a light-sensitive chemical emulsion, a photograph is a physical result of the thing represented. In Gouge's distillation of Peirce's semiotics, this classifies it as an index. The physical nature of the relationship between the sign and its referent meant that the photograph's indexicality became identified with documentary reality. In her celebrated Notes on the Index, Rosalind Krauss wrote how photographic or filmed documentation of performance art events enabled practitioners in this emerging form to create a body of work from something ephemeral, a proof that the event took place, in Amelia Jones's words, and a means for future generations to access the work in galleries. In the case of artists such as Marina Abramović and Yoko Ono, one can see the evolution from pure documentation to intermedial works that merge their performances with the arts of cinematography, editing, and installation. Artists such as these inspired much of my own practice. I originally did a degree in physics, then I was a TV director for nearly 20 years before joining the academy and redirecting my practice towards visual art. Although I work in a number of media, much of what I do is in video. In this piece from a few years back, entitled Time Machine, I performed facial exercises, ostensibly to slow or even reverse the effects of aging I had observed in myself. I shot it in close-up, slow motion and black and white, to suggest an abstraction somehow towards generic natural forms, such as landscapes, waves perhaps. Apologies for the high compression on these videos. In 2016, I took part in a residency in Kolkata, India. Everywhere you look in that city, there are thousands of people on the move. Motion seems a fundamental expression of life somehow, which appealed to me as a practitioner of the moving image. Then one evening I was having dinner near my apartment and I saw this. A kind of shadow play being acted out by hundreds of passers-by, rushing past car headlights that projected their images onto the translucent window as they headed where? We can never know. It felt poignant to me that these anonymous people should imprint their silhouettes on the chip of my camera, their index, and then disappear for good. In both these works, the index is more than a document or record of an event. It has become, in the form of video, the principal medium of expression. But more than that, for me, the leaving of a trace of oneself, a fixing of the likeness in perpetuity, expresses a defiance somehow of mortality. And the deterioration and disappearance of the self and the struggle against that is a central theme in both these pieces. I should say, as an aside, that I find Amy's comments on legacy and continued artistic output following death very interesting, and completely rearranged my view about the whole thing. Both of these works are not only indexes, but also icons in Peirce's nomenclature, meaning that they resemble the thing being represented. In a recent look at the nuance of photographic semiotics, Marta outlines Peirce's categorization of this combination of the two as decenter signs, which serve as a factual representation of something real. This categorization summarized the foundation of a power that film and photography have as an apparently robust document of a person, thing, or event. So I'm pretty new to the use of AI. I can see from the plenary earlier, there's a good deal of expertise and experience here today. I'll be interested to speaking to people about ways I can improve how I can use these tools and making me a better prompt engineer. We know, of course, that these platforms offer a new technology for the manufacture of images. One can create something that resembles a photograph. It's an impersonation of a photograph. It may resemble the thing it represents, so it can be an icon, but AI-generated output is not an index the way a photograph is. The image has been generated not by the action of light on the subject, but by a CGI system that's basing its output on a vast array of references provided for its training. I wondered if it would be possible with an AI platform to create self-portraits as one can with oil paints, watercolors, or indeed CGI. Is it too much of a stretch to say a self-portrait can be an index in these cases? After all, the image results from the physical presence of the thing being represented, the artist. In the case of this project, which I'll show you in a minute, I think it was too much of a stretch in the end. But it set me off on an experimental journey, and that's the main thing as far as I'm concerned. Anyway, I set myself an exercise to produce a handful of photographic self-portraits using only prompts and explore the kind of aesthetic consequences of that. I chose Midjourney for this task. I'd seen some quite impressive images on social media that had come from this platform. Impressive at least in that they seemed to do a good job of impersonating photographs of people. I chose a number of random moments from points in my adult life, moments that had never been photographed, and attempted to create a snap of those moments. Their interior and exterior, night and day, and in various countries, moments in which I was different ages and had different clothes and hairstyles. As we look at the photos here, and I've got some hard copies, which I'm just going to hand out. It's fair for you, I'll just give out one per row. So you can see that some of them are more successful than others, and some of you will have more successful ones than others, but you can see them all here. In fact, I'll show you, I'll load more as well. At least in terms of their resemblance to me. The iterative process in this platform offers limited scope for fine-tuning the image in the way that one might like, at least in my experience. It's a bit random still as to whether it will eventually offer you a person that's exactly as you want it. It's worth also saying one or two things about these photos, about AI images in general, in my experience on this platform. I know that they famously don't cope well yet with the specificity, for instance, of graphics or with vehicles. There's a bus somewhere, yeah, over there, there's a bus. My experience also bears out reports of Western biasing in their outputs. We heard a bit about that as well in the plenary. The architecture it spits out can be confused as well. It's the escalator there. Like this department store escalator, it sort of seems to be going up and down at the same time, which is kind of weird. And materials can often look plasticky and unnatural, like the stonework in that one on the bottom right. Midjourney also puts in a dark vignette by default also. I embraced that first, thinking mistakenly that it would give these photos an authentically retro look. Actually, I think they're much more successful when I prompted the platform not to add this. This particularly holds as I use the zoom out feature on Midjourney to create wider frames, sometimes to mitigate for poor resemblance, and sometimes because the platform default is to generate medium shots of the subject. The problem is that the vignette is not a feature you can just turn on and off, in my experience. You have to go right back to the original prompt, and effectively you can lose hours of work. Other issues can arise with the zoom out feature, such as perspective distortion and repetition of the figure requested in the prompt. The one at the top, at the train station, you can see that there's a couple of figures in the foreground that echo the main figure as well. It tends to keep reproducing from the prompt when you zoom out. So all in all, I'd say this piece isn't yet ready to exhibit. I'll return to it in a few months, having learnt a few lessons, and by then the technology, moving at the pace it is, will no doubt give me more control. Until then, it remains a work in progress. Midjourney spits out PNG files, which I up-resed and sent to my phone for printing. I use this machine to produce these prints that you've seen. It's a Fujifilm Instax Sprinter. Domestic device costs about 100 euros. I've used their instant film cameras in the past. They produce pretty reliable images. This printer also uses instant film, but you send it a digital image from your phone, which it prints from. There is then the amazing sight of a smartphone image developing in front of your eyes, like a traditional Polaroid. And because it's on actual film, these images have many of the artifacts you'd expect from domestic film photography. I was keen for these photos to have this character, and using this printer meant it was real and there was no need for any Photoshop grade. I've long been inspired by the impersonations of the actual photographic work of artists such as Gillian Waring and Cindy Sherman. I was intrigued to be making a work that consisted of impersonations of the photographic medium itself. In this case, the figures hallucinated by the AI platform are impersonations of me, and sometimes not very good. They remind me of a TV series in which a character is played by a number of actors throughout their life, and the credibility of the resemblance is sometimes a little strained. In fact, this is a project I could indeed have realized as constructed photographs using actors, makeup, and locations. But one of the strengths of these AI platforms is that they enable one to do things from the comfort of the studio, which would formerly have required significant logistics and expense. These images are selfies of a sort, self-portraits that at least resemble photographs, although without any of the process or compositional features we expect from front camera phone images. The selfie is a photographic vehicle for the creation and propagation of an idealized memory. This fixing of memory has been discussed throughout the general evolution of photography over past decades by countless writers, from Wendell Holmes to Trott Grant. And the selfie is a kind of apotheosis of the amateur snapshot that has commemorated events between families and friends since lightweight cameras became broadly available in the middle of the 20th century. Manipulation of pose, situation, framing, and post-production makes these images an untrustworthy record, just as time and shifts in our thinking and emotions make memory itself. Looking looking afresh at these images, it's hard to know how to categorize them. To what extent can we consider them descent signs, indexes, or even icons? They sometimes resemble me, but not always, and they can only be described as a physical consequence of the artist, not of the environment. The more one thinks about them, the more they elude characterization. And yet, like the true photography that these images emulate, they maintain, as Michael Charlesworth puts it, a rhetorical force in excess of their documentary value. This is an ongoing experiment with embryonic creative technology, and I wasn't quite sure at first where the journey would take me. The exaggerated inaccuracy of the memories evoked become a commentary on memory itself. We cannot trust or rely on it, or indeed on any of the signs with which we attempt to articulate it. Thank you.
Awesome lecture, awesome imagery. And I love that you put it into the Polaroid. I mean, this to me reads as the photo. But my question, and I'm happy to brainstorm with you and even sit down with you if I need to, but my question is, did you also upload your images of your face into the prompt?
No, I deliberately wanted to avoid doing that. Okay. Just because I wanted, it was an exercise in a sense. You know, how far could I get with just words? Like that thing you were saying earlier on about language. You know.
Yes,
yeah. I don't know whether it would have been any different, but it's funny when you upload images into Midjourney because it can do crazy things with them anyway, in my experience. Yeah, interesting. I'm glad you brought that up. I don't know what the value of the exercise is. I mean, it's an exercise, isn't it? It's quite interesting. I mean, I kind of think part of the point of the exercise is that I could, nowadays with something like Photoshop, I could put my own image into that and stick it in any scene, and so I wanted to do something more extreme, I suppose.
So then that begs the question of why do you think they're not ready?
Well, there's things about them that annoy me, about that I'd like to go right back to the prompt and redo it again. So it's just like, it's maybe not far off. I think the fact that they are actually not very good resemblance sometimes, that's got a conceptual strength and power which I quite like. But things like the vignette, which by the time I got the work done, it was there and I couldn't get rid of it. I would read, because it's quite a lot of work, just as I'm sure you know, just to get to one of these images, hours and hours and hours. So I didn't have the time really. So yeah. Thank you for the questions.
Thank you. It's an awesome presentation, and it is also nice to hear there are people thinking in the same manner. I'm not an artist, I'm an art historian, but I like to work with Midjourney from the day I learned it. Oh, wow, that's possible. I just keep asking weird questions. I'm going to show some of them tomorrow during my lecture, although they're not really related, but just the possibility, it is like, she or he or it can answer you, depending on the prompt, obviously. But sometimes you get angry that you cannot get what you have imagined. It's like, to me, it's like a person over there asking. But just have you changed your prompts while in the process of creating these photos, or in what manner? Or do you have a style of prompting?
It's a good question about the prompt, and I'm very happy to brainstorm with Amy and you and anybody else about how to use this platform. The reason I talk about it being, feeling very embryonic is it reminds me of the very early days of digital photography in a way. You're working with something that an engineer has put together. It's not actually something that's been designed for creative people. Creative people are appropriating it at the moment, it feels to me. Anyway, so my prompts didn't vary very much. Obviously the prompt about the place or the hairstyle or the clothing or the age, they tended, time of day, all that obviously changed. But the basic structure of the prompt didn't change. I tried to keep them as simple as possible, because as soon as I found I was introducing any extra layers of complexity, it would do one or the other, or the opposite, which is very peculiar.
You can try ChatGPT or Bard write a prompt for you as well. I've tried this one.
Yeah, does that work for you?
then you've got to deal with ChatGPT, which is equally as annoying.
It's amazing because you can ask it's like I wrote a text and I asked ChatGPT to write in the romantic style of the 19th century, or did it? I mean, just change some words, or the same text was written as it was written by Marquez, or Malouf. It's amazing. It's amazing.
Yeah,
but
I agree with
this
that.
what you are trying to do is quite interesting, and I'd like to discuss with you for further.
Yeah. No, it's a funny story. I was working on this project on my kitchen table, and my son came down, who's 22, and he said, "Oh, you're using Discord. I didn't know you were on Discord." So I explained what I was doing, because he's a gamer, And I said, do you want to make some AI art? So he said, yeah. So he sat down, and there's this joke in my house that he eats nothing but chicken and rice, so he sat down and he wrote down, "Man eating chicken and rice in a Studio Ghibli style." So we got 4 pictures, and it was pretty good. I mean, I wouldn't say I was an expert on Studio Ghibli, but I've obviously seen the films. And 3 of them were sort of okay, and the last one was mad, because the chicken was an actual feathered bird standing on the table. That's like my experience all over, it just does mad things.
So, good morning, ladies and gentlemen. First of all, we would like to thank you for the opportunity to present ourselves to you at today's conference. And we are from the Institute of Nuclear Physics, Polish Academy of Sciences in Kraków, from the Department of Soft Matter Research. And one of our scientific interests are liquid crystals. Therefore, today we would like to show you some results related with liquid crystal texture, neural network, and art. And this is the vision of your conference logo visible in liquid crystalline world. So, to begin with, we will try to explain you what are liquid crystals, how they appear under a microscopic view, and which computational models we use to analyze liquid crystal textures, like neural networks, style transfer, and deep dream. So, the question is, why are liquid crystals called liquid crystals? So, in 1988, Friedrich Reinitzer started the research on melting of cholesterol benzoate, and he found that this compound melted differently than, for example, normal ice. So first it formed a cloudy liquid, which became transparent at higher temperatures. So next, Otto Lehmann found that this cloudy liquid is birefringent, and that's why he named it as liquid crystal. But why the nature of melting of liquid crystals is such different? In normal crystal phase, our molecules are oriented, the centers of gravity are oriented, and they align in specific positions. In liquid phase, molecules can move and can rotate. However, the liquid crystal phase is formed only by molecules which perform a strongly anisotropy of a shape, for example, like a pen. So the molecules can move and can rotate in this direction when upon the transition from crystal to liquid crystal phase. However, the possibility of rotation in this direction is open upon transition from liquid crystal to liquid phase. And we may predict which liquid crystal phase occurs in our compound under study by using some experimental methods, like differential scanning colorimetry. We calculate the change of enthalpy and entropy for anomalies related to phase transitions, or by broadband dielectric spectroscopy, we observe some characteristic relaxation processes, also for liquid crystal phases, or by observation of beautiful textures under microscope, which I show you later. So, as we may assume, there are many liquid crystal phases, and today we would like to focus on only thermotropic phases. Thermotropic means that these phases are changed upon temperature, and these phases differ in the orienting of molecules. So, in the nematic phase, the molecules are only oriented around the specific direction. In synectic phases, they also form layers, and in each layer they may be aligned perpendicular or at a certain angle to the normal to the layer. And there are also more ordered smectic phases in which we observe also positional order, so molecules can align some shapes within each layer. Also, liquid crystals have very interesting features, and these features are related with anisotropy. Anisotropy means that the properties are different depending on the direction they can be measured. And the most important is the optical anisotropy. So when the light is pulses to the liquid crystalline material, we observe two refractive rays. Ordinary, which behaves according to the Snellius law, and also extraordinary. And due to the optical anisotropy of liquid crystals, it is possible to observe them under microscope. So our sample is placed between two crossed polarizers, and when the compound is in the optically isotropic phase, like liquid phase, we observed black image. However, when it is in the optically anisotropic phase, like liquid crystal phase, we observe the image called texture. And the pattern of texture is depending on many different factors, like the thickness layer of our material, like the material and quality of glass plates, like the influence of the external magnetic and electric fields, and so on. So the first very important thing is that each texture is characteristic for each liquid crystal phase. And for example, our group found the characteristic texture for glassy state with cracks, and this work was distinguished as the cover of International Liquid Crystals Journal. As probably we know, the well-known applications of liquid crystals are related with optics, electronics, yes, we know liquid crystal displays, but also in medicine, pharmaceutics, and cosmetics. But the second very important area of using liquid crystals is related with art, graphics, and industrial design. And this is the organization called International Liquid Crystal Society, which organized the Liquid Crystal Art Contest. So the jury choose in each month the most beautiful texture for submitted pictures, and you may find these textures on this website. I strongly encourage you to visit them, because also I am the main webmaster of this site. And now I would like to stop my part of the presentation, and Natalia, the floor is yours.
Nowadays, many researchers use neural networks to study liquid crystals and materials properties. Neural network is a mathematical concept which really mimics the function and structure of the biological neural networks, the brain. Each neural network consists of 3 layers: the input layers, the hidden layers, and the output layers. Each layers are connected to each other by waves which change during the learning process. There are many neural networks types, but the most popular is convolution neural network. It consists with convolution layer, max pooling layer, and a fully connected layer. The first 2 layers are just for feature extraction, and the fully connection layer is a typical neural network. Let's talk about the style transfer. The style transfer is a technique to blend style of one image into the another image, while the second image content stay intact. In our study, we used the Salvador Dali's work ship with butterfly cells, and it was the content image. We used a style image as a chosen texture of liquid crystals. And as you can see, many phases are very similar to each other. It is really hard to distinguish texture of smectic A from texture of smectic B. Also, you need some expertise to distinguish texture of smectic C from smectic F, G, and I. But when you apply the style transfer technique, we can see some differences. So after this procedure, the texture of smectic I is quite different from texture of smectic B. Also, there you can see some difference between those textures.
But style transfer is not everything. There also is a well-known technique of deep dreaming. If you look on the convolutional neural network, each layer learns different types. And the further you go, the more detailed the neural network see, let's say. And in deep dream, at first we take the set of an image, we put it to the neural network, and then we choose the layer and apply, and the algorithm is looking at the similarities between the set of image that we use for learning and the image we select. And those are the results. We use VGG16 neural network and data set of ImageNet. It is a set of image of different things, really, from animals to the flowers, building, bicycles, vehicles, and so on. There's, I think, almost 10,000 categories in this ImageNet, and those are the results. In the violet box, we put the texture of selected liquid crystal substances, and here you can see the output of deep dream. And as you can see, there are some eyes, feathers, skins, legs, and so on. And those are examples of others. And liquid crystal texture, but in my opinion, the differences are not spectacular as in case of style transfer. And those are the conclusions of our presentations, but I think the last one is the most important because the style transfer and the deep dream allow us to increase the data sets that we can use to build neural network that could distinguish different liquid crystal textures. We'd like to thank our co-workers, and this work was funded by a Miniatura project, and thank you very much for your attention.
Sorry, I missed the process, so it was not clear for me. So you were talking about this painting of Dali, then you start talking about liquid crystals, and it's like, you know, you take the image digitally and you somehow turn it into a kind of liquid crystals or whatever. I mean, just what I'm missing here. Where do the crystals come from?
Okay, so liquid crystal comes from laboratory. And you also have this in your phone, and they are all around us. But the problem is here that there are many types of liquid crystal. And the question is, what the type of liquid crystal we see? And one of the methods that we can use to say it is polarizing microscopy. So these beautiful images, each phase gives us different images. But sometimes the structures of this phase, of different phase, are really different, but the images are similar. And we are looking the way to say, okay, this image corresponds to spectic A, and this image corresponds to spectic B. And if you are physics, the spectic A is more like liquids, and spectic B is more like crystals. Oh. So in our point of view, there are really, really very big differences. But the image is similar.
Oh, thank you.
For
So, there are next two questions.
Just a very quick question. I've never used Deep Dream. What's your experience of it?
It was pretty nice, you know, and yeah, for me it's just like you lay on the, I don't know, on a beach and see the clouds, and you're trying to imagine what the shapes are, yeah? And Deep Dream just do that by just multiplying and adding some mathematical functions. Really? Yeah.
Thanks. I'll talk to you about it later.
Okay.
Thank you for your...
No,
Thank you for your presentation. Absolutely inspiring. Just continuing asking questions relating to these methods you used. You also mentioned ImageNet. ImageNet consists of millions of images. How do you use them to normalize output or something like that? Because there's like 3 stages involved: picture of Salvador Dali, images of liquid crystals, and images from ImageNet. And what's the relation? How the ImageNet would help this process? Thank you.
So, of course, you have to have a GPU. So you have to have a really big amount of RAM. And if you have it, everything is great. And also we program it by finger using TensorFlow library, which is in Python language. And we just use supercomputers and everything is I don't know if I answered your...
No, just images from ImageNet. I understand that you also use images from ImageNet.
Yes. No. I use, sorry. So, those are, we take ImageNet dataset and we put through the neural network. And each category, the neural network classify each image to a different category. And really this is what neural network learn, the features, yes. And if you put one layer from neural network and then apply it, the deep dream function, on your image, then you will observe that something similar.
Yep. Thank you. Thank you. Yeah, thank you. Very clear. I understand. Thank you. Yeah. So neural network was trained before with ImageNet materials. Yeah. Thank you. Very clear.